these slides here.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to this first event here, doctoral student seminar, the Career Path Seminar Series. Today we have Dr. Dustin Weiler with us to share his job search experience. This event is co-organized by Department of Industrial Engineering, Logistics and Distribution Institute, and INFORMS student chapter at UofL. Purpose of this seminar is to help PhD students to get a good job search process, to get started with a good job search process. And we have plans to invite people from industry and academia to help PhD students to guide them in this in their job search process. Though the target audience is here for are the PhD students, but we believe this seminar series will be helpful for those who want to pursue the graduate studies. So before we start, I want to share some background information, like why we're doing and what's the history. So I want to first talk about that. Our department chair, Dr. Parikh, is he here?
Yeah, he's here.
Okay. So
I am.
Hi, Dr. Parikh. Good morning.
Hi, morning.
So our department chair, Dr. Parikh, has established a PhD student advisory board, and the purpose of this board here, the PhD students can share their concern or any kind of recommendation to him to improve their experience in the department. So in the first meeting of that advisory board, we came up with this idea that we need some kind of platform that help us to land our job. Like someone we want to go to industry, someone we go to academia. So what should be the process? We should know ahead of our before we complete our degree. So I think this is one of the very good platform for us to learn that process. So I want to thank Dr. Parikh to initiate this process. Then I want to thank Dr. Gentili and Dr. Polishi, who really worked with us to make it happen. That they really contributed to make this event occur. And I also want to thank my colleague Jacob Reed, who first discovered the first speaker, the Dustin, who's gonna talk to us today. And Jacob is his friend, and Jacob mainly invited him to this event. And before I talk about Dustin, I just want to share some housekeeping information. So this event, Justin has joined us on phone, so he gonna mainly, it will be a question answer session. We have provided him with a set of questions. So mainly he gonna talk through those questions, just like a story, the way Dustin has prepared. And for us, we can also ask question anytime. You can use the chat box, you can ask questions. Dr. Paleshi gonna monitor the chat box, and if you have any question, he gonna pop up and discuss with Dustin about the question. And obviously there will be a live question answer session at the end. So anyone can ask question. You have to raise your hand, then we'll moderate who's gonna go first. And at the end, there will be very short thank you note from Dr. Polishi, Dr. Gentili, and Dr. Parikh. So with this, let me introduce our first speaker here, Dr. Dustin Weiler, who is an experienced human factor engineer at the Boeing Company. Justin just completed his PhD. He just defended, I think, in 2 weeks, and he completed his PhD from University of Wisconsin-Madison. And his area of concentration is human factors. Justin did his master's from Louisville and his bachelor's from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. So with this, I want to invite Dustin to talk with. Here I have the first set of questions for him, and we'll also provide him with more questions, but these are the set of questions to get him started. So welcome, Dustin.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. And full disclosure, I do not have the questions in front of me. I'm on the Boeing campus, so I can't have personal laptops besides a phone. So I don't have the questions with me. So if you could just go ahead and ask that first question for me. I'll just go ahead and talk through it.
Okay, sure. So for first here we have, like, I would like to introduce yourself. Like you're gonna talk about your job, and then you also talk. I will also want to a little bit about your dissertation research, your education, your some experience about your PhD life to get started with. I think these are the first set of questions.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. So yeah, as you had mentioned, my brief highlights, I just defended my dissertation in home-based dementia caregiving. I defended that 2 weeks ago at the University of Wisconsin, and successfully defended that, rather. So that's obviously weight off my shoulders, and I'm sure everybody listening who's going through the process can imagine what that will feel like when it's their turn. And so before I got to Wisconsin, as you mentioned, I was at the University of Louisville. Dr. Jason Salim had recruited me right after I finished my undergrad work at the University of Embry-Riddle. And so, that's my experience has gone from aviation at Embry-Riddle to healthcare at the University of Louisville, to healthcare at Wisconsin. And now that I'm at Boeing, obviously doing more aviation and military type work. So I think it's important for students that are, starting this job process or considering academia or industry to really kind of gauge what they're interested in. For me, it was really hard to make a selection because I was truly interested in aviation and things that go fast and things that blow stuff up, like jets. And then there was also an extreme interest in healthcare and wanting to help the community and, be able to have some sort of positive input on, the sick and the ill. So, there was really hard to really pick a avenue that I wanted to go down. So I would strongly encourage students to really think about what really interests them and try to find a job in that type of domain, no matter what it is. Yeah, so that's pretty much myself in a nutshell, what I've been doing and where I'm at currently. What else did I miss anything in that question that I need to?
I think we have just to share about like your dissertation, like what are the main questions you addressed, and like where you have published, like just to give a high level overview.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so if everybody, if you'd like to, you could check out my LinkedIn page. I should have a link on there to a personal website and a link to my updated curriculum vitae, which has a list of all my publications. Pretty much everything there is all going to be human factors related. But I've published in various human factors journals, and specifically mostly within the human factors conference proceedings. That's where a lot of my publications have been. Currently, I'm in the process of writing 2 papers from my dissertation that'll go into the that I'm trying to get into the ergonomics and the applied ergonomics journal. And so with my dissertation, what I was able to do in human factors is look at, kind of describe how care is delivered in the home for people with dementia. So there's an aging population, and it's increasing, and these people that are suffering from dementia are starting to say that they prefer to be cared for at home and not in a formal care facility. So if those wishes are met and followed through by their family members, chances are that these people are being cared for in the home or in some sort of community setting, such as, a senior apartments, for example. So it's not exactly formal care. Caregivers are faced with this struggle of trying to provide very specific care for dementia, despite 99% of them or so not having any sort of training on dementia care, period. So there's a huge challenge to find a way to provide care appropriately in the home without making care, quote unquote, worse in a lot of ways. So that's kind of what my research focused on. I was able to identify a weakness in human factors current methodologies, especially when we're looking at understanding interactions between contextual factors of care. So what I did was able to identify a few seminal models that kind of are used to frame and describe how work is done in a healthcare facility. And then I was able to take that and apply that to an informal care setting such as the home, and really kind of identify interactions between contextual factors that influence how caregivers provide care. And then on top of that, that was my first research question. And the second research question, I looked at identifying what sort of constraints or factors that negatively impact care, and then how do caregivers implement strategies to overcome those constraints. And so that's kind of the high level breakdown of my two research questions for my dissertation. Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, I do have, like I said earlier, a good handful of publications and published in various journals, and that can all be found. Should be through, if you just go into Google Scholar and look up my name, there's not very many Dustin Weilers out there, so I should be right there, and you can find everything on that as well. So now I think that was everything. Was there anything I missed?
I think that covers everything about your basic introduction, what we're interested to learn. And then now we want to move into directly your job search process. I think we have here first question, like which point of your PhD you started your job search preparation, or you have started applying for jobs, like you're ready for jobs. So at which point you thought or you started your process?
Okay. So in full disclosure, what I'm going to describe here is obviously from a human factors perspective. Various, sub-sciences within engineering are probably going to have different experiences, but from what I understood in the human factors profession, I was always told to start looking for jobs approximately 1 year to a year and a half in advance of finishing my PhD. And so once that timeline started to hit, I started to do some initial job searches. The tricky thing with human factors is that there are so many synonyms for the term human factors. And so what I did is, over the course of a couple of years, every conference I went to, when they handed out the programs, I would go through the program and highlight every company that I found that had something to do with the conference, whether it was they sponsored something, they are presenting something, anything along those lines, because I saw it as, if a company is willing to put enough money into a conference of some sort, then they must have some level of interest in human factors. And so I kept a running spreadsheet of over 100, it ended up being over 100 rows of various companies that had been associated with some part of a human factors conference. And so what I did from there is I went into each company's website. I started to look at any potential job openings, and if I saw something that I thought by the job name, if it sounded like human factors, I went ahead and looked through the description. I was like, okay, this is human factors. Okay, this is not. And so then I started keeping a running log of various job titles. And then I started to take those job titles and run some basic searches in LinkedIn using those job titles, and started to find openings. And so I really did a lot of legwork in terms of finding out, what job titles exist for human factors, where are they, who's hiring, who's not, and really kind of build an understanding as to what the layout looks like in the industry world. And then when it came time to really start seriously applying, I had already kind of listed those companies in order of which ones I had a preference for and which ones I thought, might not exactly fit what I'm looking for. And I just kind of went down that list. Now, looking back at it, that entire process, for me at least, was kind of a waste of time. And here's why. My job at Boeing, I did secure at first through the most recent Human Factors and Ergonomics conference that was held in person, which was in Seattle, not this past year, but I believe in 2019. I went to Seattle, went to the Career Center, ran into two of my friends that I went to Embry-Riddle with. They both currently work at Boeing. They were like, hey, let me have your resume. We'll give it to, our managers, and, we'll have you sit down with them and we'll chat. that happened. I chatted with them. Those managers sent my resume throughout Boeing, so to Boeing Commercial and Boeing Defense. And then I ended up getting a call a week later from Boeing Defense from here in St. Louis saying, hey, we want to interview you. And it just kind of snowballed from there. So it turns out for me, I didn't even need to do all that work because I ended up getting my first real interview opportunity with Boeing through my network. So that kind of leads me into that other item of when you're starting to do job searches, really start to network as much as you can. I know it's difficult now with COVID and you're not able to go out to conferences and actually meet people and discuss with people, but you know, social media with LinkedIn and stuff is you know, going to be probably your best friend for the foreseeable future until this whole thing settles down. But what I did was just build up my network and kept keeping in touch with your network. It's one thing to just be connected to somebody on LinkedIn, but to, if they post something interesting, you know, comment on it, you know, do something to kind of, you know, build some sort of initial relationship, if you will, with your network. And so that just kind of happened for me in person. So I can't stress that enough. There's a lot of legwork you have to do on your own, but also don't be afraid to network and don't be afraid to lean on your network to really kind of get your first opportunity. Because sometimes all you really need is that one little opening in the door. All you need is that one opportunity, that one chance for an interview, and then you can do the rest. Kind of what that one opportunity for an interview. I got that opportunity, and obviously I did something right because now I'm here. But that's kind of those are kind of my thoughts with that particular question. I don't know if there's follow-ups or if you want to just go to the next question, just let me know.
Yes, thanks. That's a nice answer. We have few questions in the chat box. I think we'll those are also in the list. We'll go through one by one. But before that, I have few questions. I think that goes through the flow of this conversation. So now, as we know, like how you started, when you started your job search and how you prepared for the build your network. So we also know about like how you for each job there's some technical skills, you need some soft skills. So how you prepare yourself to achieve those skills, and also we also need to have a good resume like in a standard way so that we can reach to the employers. So how you build a resume, and also I will also learn about like your cover letter, like how you prepare those basic detailed stuffs. You get our question, okay, right?
Yep. Okay. So basically, I guess I'll start with the cover letter and the resume stuff. So what I started with was I just sat down and took a few hours and really did like a self-assessment and kind of figured out, okay, here's what I'm really good at. Okay, these are the kinds of things I need to really emphasize in my cover letters and in my resumes. And then I thought, okay, well, what am I really bad at? And, you know, how can I look to improve that? And then if I'm really bad at it, then maybe I need to try to identify, you know, certain job descriptions that might require that of me and be like, okay, that's probably not going to be a good fit for me. So that's another way you can kind of, quote unquote, filter out quote unquote, bad job opportunities versus good ones for you, is really be honest with yourself and be honest with your evaluation of yourself and say, I'm good at X, but bad at Y. So I should really build that up in my resume and in my cover letter. And so I first started with that assessment, you know, understood what my strengths and weaknesses. And then I went into my resume and cover letters, and I built one, I guess, if you could call it like I built like one master resume and one master cover letter that had everything as generalizable as possible. And then from that, I would find a job opportunity I wanted to apply for. I would then take that master resume or cover letter and make the alterations to make it fit the job description. So that way, when the computer system or the recruiter or whoever's looking at it from HR would see it and be like, okay, yeah, this guy really fits what this description is. Let's maybe put him off you have a better chance of being put off to the side for a potential interview. So for me, it was really understanding what are the key concepts that these job descriptions are looking for, and making sure that that is somehow incorporated into my cover letter and or resume. But work smarter, not harder. That's why I would say have a master generalized versions of both of those, and then just modify it slightly for each job description. And also, I would also highly recommend having whoever your advisors are to take a look at it and to see if they can give any feedback on how to improve it. I know when I was first kind of going through this process initially at the University of Louisville, Dr. Jason Salim was awesome with always giving me really good feedback on my resume and stuff. Your advisors are there because they want you to succeed, and your success speaks volumes to them as well. So definitely don't be afraid to potentially lean on them and get their feedback and have them help you improve. Yeah, so those would be my suggestions for like the resume and you know, cover letter type items. There was another part of that question, but it slips my mind.
Your skills, like soft skills or technical skills, like how you prepared.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So basically, some of the skills that you may or may not have will just be solely dependent upon what opportunities you have. So, for example, for me, I didn't have a ton of coding opportunities, and that's fine because I'm not good at coding. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it at all. So that's fine by me. I knew that was going to be a weakness. But what I did do though is I just kind of self-taught just some basic understandings of certain software programs that I heard might be relevant in the human factors field. So in human factors, there's kind of a user experience researcher and like a user interface designer. So they're similar concepts, but one is more hands-on design and the other one's more research-based. I was definitely more of a research-based individual, but I knew but I saw in some of these job descriptions that some of them are hybrid, where you may be required to do some design. And so with that, I found some information on, you know, what sort of design softwares are used generally in the industry. And I just kind of pulled up some YouTube videos and self-taught, you know, how some of these work, what are the capabilities. So that way, if questions came up in the interviews, or if, you know, I got lucky enough to get a position that does that, I would have at least some sort of understanding as how to use software. So don't be afraid to self-teach certain capabilities or abilities to yourself, because you may not get that opportunity in research or in coursework, and it feels like every company might be using different software programs that might do the exact same task. So don't be afraid to go out and look up and figure out how to use certain softwares. There's also a few programs out there that I'm sure that you can find on the internet that have some sort of online courses or something along those lines to kind of teach your skills. But that all kind of starts with you kind of looking at like I said earlier, looking at yourself and being critical of yourself and analyzing, here's what I'm good at, here's what I'm bad at, here's how I can improve what I'm bad at, and then work to improve yourself to become as well-rounded as possible.
Well, that sounds so interesting, Lex. Yes. Thank you, Dustin, sharing those ideas. And with that, I want to move on to the next question. I think it will be like the flow is like this. Like now we will talk about like how you prepared for a job interview. Like you have a job interview, like what kind of preparation you had to take for those interviews.
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to what I said earlier about being aware of what your strengths and weaknesses are, and definitely work on doing a lot of work before the interview and really kind of preparing some sort of basic responses, whether it's full statements or bullet points to talk to, because the point of the interview really is that they must have liked something on your resume enough to chat with you, and this interview is now your opportunity to really magnify what you're good at and, you know, what you can bring to the table. So in preparation for the interview, I would say what worked for me was, again, reviewing that self-assessment, reading through that job description more than once, and really identifying key concepts, key tasks, and key job responsibilities that come with that position. And then looking back at my experience and saying, okay, well, if one of these job descriptions is like interact with, users of a product to understand, user needs, I would go back and say, okay, well, I've done X, Y, and Z at all these other companies or all these other projects, and that contributes to that. So if I get a question on that topic, then I know I need to talk about this experience and this experience and this experience. And so really kind of planning out what you expect or what you could expect to be asked on an interview is important. The other item too is, again, at least in my experience with Boeing, when they reached out to me for an interview, they specifically said, hey, we do a certain method of interview and we expect a certain type of response that follows, a certain step-by-step process. And so we want you to respond in this way. So I went ahead and prepared myself mentally to answer questions in a certain method. So that was kind of, that kind of threw me for a loop, and I had to really think on my feet, and don't be surprised if that happens to any company, really. They want to kind of see if you can, think on your feet and adjust accordingly. So they're definitely put in a ton of work before the interview. Don't just show up and expect to do well. I'd like to think that's well known by now, but if it's not, surprise, you have to do a lot of work before the interview to really, quote unquote, ace it.
Thank you, Dustin. That was like really, we need to be really prepared, like when we have to face an interview. I think so. In the flow of this interview, we want to ask you the next question. Like when you have the interview, you have, for example, a company, they offer you a job offer. They give you a job offer. Like then, what criteria you use to assess like whether this is the right company or right place for you to work or not?
Yeah, and I think some of that is when you're applying to a company, you kind of have to know why you want to be there, because in some of these interviews, these companies are going to ask, they generally, at least in my experience, they give you a plate of time at the end if you have any questions, and this is kind of where you can really get an understanding for the company itself. And so for me, at least, I had to really think about, what do I want to do? What kind of company do I want to work for? Do I want to work for a startup, or do I want to work for a company that has a lot of stability? So in full disclosure, given the fact that, when I went through the interview process, it was before COVID, but by the time I got an offer, it was February, March range, and COVID was really starting to pick up. Things started to shut down. And I was like, okay, well, I definitely want to be in some place that I believe is going to be stable. And so, that's why I ended up making the selection that I did to go to, one of the reasons at least that I made the selection to go to Boeing. I felt that it was stable, and the human factors team is growing there. The human factors team is really, really strong. So I wanted to be surrounded by, strong human factors researchers. I wanted to be surrounded by, a growing team that's very supportive, in which they are, and I thought they were at the time. And I want to be with a company that has a great reputation and at least for treating employees well, and has really good, benefits. And, Boeing kind of checked all those boxes for me. So those are all some of the things I would suggest considering, especially if it's your first quote unquote real job coming out of school, trying to find a place with really good benefits, a place that'll allow you to move up, and a place that'll allow you to also learn and build your career as a whole. Because although you may feel like you know a ton based off your education and your schooling, when you get into the real world, there's a lot of things you don't know, and so you need to be surrounded by people that are willing to help you mold and advance and develop yourself as a engineer or a scientist or whatever your job title is. So those are some things that I would also consider, or I would suggest everybody consider Some other things that came to mind for me also was overall location. I didn't want to be that too far away from my family. I knew I kind of wanted to be in the Midwest or even on the East Coast. So I knew anything on the West Coast was not going to be an option for me. I just kind of knew where I wanted to be location wise. So that kind of played a role for me as well. So those are just some small things for people to consider.
Mm-hmm. So that's nice, Lo. So with this, we'll move into some previous experiences. Like when you are in this is more related to the question Dr. Parikh asked. So when you're in the graduate school, you're deciding between industry, whether you want to go to industry position or you want to go for academic position. Like, did you have this dilemma? And if you had, then how you decided, like, what do you want to be?
Yeah. So yeah, I think Salim might be getting some PTSD if he's listening, but I always flip back and forth between academia and industry. And I know I've asked him, for his thoughts on, where he thought I might be a best fit, whether it's industry or academia. And this is something that I struggled with throughout my career, not just at the University of Louisville, but also University of Wisconsin. Two different rationales though, right? So like when I was leaving University of Louisville, it was either to go, continue a PhD or, go into industry. So it's kind of, again, continue academia or do industry. And there's pros and cons to both, but I thought, if I want to kind of climb a ladder and potentially be more in a management position, or if I wanted to, start an industry and go back into academia, it's probably best if I just do the PhD now. And so that was kind of that first decision between academia and industry. And so I chose to do the PhD. And then at the end of my PhD, I had to choose again, do I want to, go for some sort of academic position and, try to become a tenure track professor or something along those lines, or do I want to go into industry? And so there's a lot to consider there, right? So each position, whether it's industry or academia, they're going to have different requirements. So if you're going for a tenure track position, I have obviously no experience doing that, but I would imagine there is a ton of work outside of the 40-hour work week that has to go into that, because you're working towards grants, you're working towards student development, you're working towards building your own research lab and your own credibility, and so on and so forth. Whereas with industry, depending on the industry you're in, generally speaking, it's about a 40-hour work week, no more, no less. And so those, just kind of the amount of work you have to go into it kind of played a role in my decision-making process. And to be quite honest, the dissertation really kind of burnt me out in terms of writing. So I feel like I want to take a little bit of a break from writing. So industry is probably more the way I wanted to go. So there's a ton to consider in that decision. And that's, kind of going to be up to each individual person. And I would highly recommend that they talk to, people in both academia and in industry about the pros and cons of each. Because again, one thing you don't want to do is try to make a decision under the thought process of what you're expecting and it be totally different. For me so far, what I expected in industry has been exactly what I've gotten so far. So that's good. But like I said, I'd highly suggest people talk to professors that have recently gone through the tenure track position, talk to professors at other universities to see how each university might differ in that type of requirement and process. So it's, again, just about talking to people, learning about the different positions, and be honest with yourself in terms of what you're looking for, and making that choice based on what you think best fits your needs.
Mm-hmm. That's really a difficult position, to decide whether you want to go to academia or an industry. I know there's no easy answer for it. You have to the aspirant on himself, he has to decide what he likes to be. I think we get some idea from Dustin, how he navigated through this process. So with this, I have a next question. I think you have answered a little bit of it. That is like while you were deciding, like how you took help from your advisor, academic advisor, or from your friends, like how you approached them and how you shared your information that you are deciding this between academia and industry, and then how should I think about this? So could you please share your experience, like how you you can say took advice or took suggestion from your professor or your friends or colleagues?
Yeah, so I definitely sought advice. I think you touched upon it. I definitely sought advice from my advisors, both Dr. Jason Saline there at Louisville and also Dr. Nicole Werner up at University of Wisconsin. When I was making these decisions, I definitely talked to them multiple times about, what to consider, what to look for, and so on and so forth. And then based off building out my networks at, various conferences, talking to, other professors or, other students that are going through similar decisions at other universities, and kind of pooling together, if you will, all of our advisors are telling us. So as students, I definitely highly recommend working with other students, not just in your own university, but outside of your university, and really try to get a more of a quote unquote holistic understanding as to what to expect. Every advisor is going to have different advice. And I think if we as students, or you guys as students rather, can work together and really understand what is being said across, all the universities in terms of advice, it could definitely be beneficial to really gauge how everybody's feeling and what to consider. One advisor will have different experiences than another, and so their feedback or their advice might be totally different, but might be more applicable to you. So it's always good to ask around, and don't be afraid to ask for input. I'm sure, at least in the human factors world, almost everybody is super friendly and willing to help each other out. We're all, working towards the same goal. So that's always positive, at least in our science.
That's
yeah,
great to hear. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say I definitely sought advice from my advisors and fellow students. The other item that I think I haven't talked about is also just job availability. So because I was graduating in the fall, as this semester rather, the openings and the application process for industry is always rolling, meaning like there's always openings in industry, whereas in academia it tends to be on some sort of schedule, usually starting in the fall. So you have to apply by a certain date and so on and so forth. And then sometimes some universities might require some sort of fellowship experience first. And so you kind of have to go through that process first. Everything's different, but the other thing that played a part in my decision is also just overall availability. So I was in the process of thinking about applying for 2 academic positions, but then I just saw all the other positions in industry, and I was like, okay, well, I think these industry positions fit more of what I'm looking for. So I went with that route also, just because there's obviously more opportunities that were available to me in industry than in academia.
So you have chosen for industry. So is it the end? So you do not want to go to academia. So what do you think in future? Is there a chance, like, or is it possible to jump back into academia?
Yeah, I think that question, the answer to that question is probably is actually really difficult to answer, I would imagine. I would also think that each science is probably different. And also, depending on who you ask, and human factors, at least, it's my understanding that it is possible to go from industry back to academia. However, sometimes in academic positions, they really value publications. And so if you're in an industry position that allows you to publish and write and, stay involved and continue to be super involved with various societies that are related to your science, then it's easier to jump from industry to academia. So for me, it's something that I'm definitely going to consider when the time comes to jump back to academia. Who knows when that'll be yet, but it's definitely something I'm considering, and definitely, at least in my science, is something that's possible. I'm not entirely sure what it's like in other fields of engineering. If that switch is possible, but I know at least in human factors, it was my understanding that it can be done and it has been done. So, I won't be afraid to make that jump back if the time comes. So that's also one of the things that I thought was that didn't really help my decision, because you can jump back and forth. It wasn't like you pick one and you're stuck with it forever kind of thing. It's, there's some malleability there.
So that's great. So with this, I want to ask a question from Dr. Gentili. It's one of our favorite questions. So she also asked you earlier. So that at this time, like, you wanted to go for industry. So if you knew it from the beginning of your PhD, then how you would prepare yourself from the very beginning of your PhD?
I think if I would have known from the very beginning when I started the PhD that industry was the route I was going to go, I probably would have, at various conferences, I probably would have been a little bit more targeted in my networking. I probably would have started to look more and talk more with other companies. I probably would have spent more time in the career centers. I probably also would have maybe tried to be a little bit more involved in design related items and really try to improve my ability to work on softwares and really figure out, how a design process works from an industry perspective rather than a theoretical perspective, as a lot of my research was. So I think it would just kind of really just change who I interacted with and the various projects and stuff that I ended up taking on.
That's very interesting. So with this, I'm almost done with my set of questions. Now we can I can take question from the audience. We already have few questions. We have already went through Dr. Parikh's question. So from the audience, Seema, she's a human factors student, a PhD student. She asked a question. In your current company, do you have any available internship position related to human factors? And if yes, what is the applying and interviewing process?
Yeah, so I can't speak for any internship or co-op opportunities within the Boeing Company currently. I'm not far enough up the management ladder, so to speak, to really know that. However, I would say that one of the things with human factors, especially in military and government-related work, such as the stuff that I do at Boeing, human factors tend to be referenced as systems engineering. So if you're looking for internships or co-ops in human factors, especially in this type of application, I would definitely suggest looking up systems engineering or system support engineering. Sometimes there's human factors positions that pop up there through that type of searching. But yeah, within Boeing, I'm not entirely sure. But if you go to the Boeing careers website, there are various tabs and filters to look through co-ops and internships. And they're always accepting applications, and they kind of just go through them when they have availability and are looking to hire someone. So I would definitely suggest putting something in through the careers page, creating a career profile, and creating alerts. And so that way, whenever something's posted, you can be alerted and can submit, be one of the first ones to submit. So that's kind of that's my suggestion, at least for anybody in human factors looking at the Boeing Company.
Thanks. We have another question from a student. So he wants to learn about your role, like at Boeing, like what kind of work you were doing at Boeing related to human factor.
Yeah, so basically what I'm doing with human factors is mostly doing a little bit of research and development, so trying to understand needs of aircrew, and then I'm also looking at requirements compliance. So we have a set of requirements for various products, and we have to look at the way the product is being built, and if it's going to meet the requirements we've set forth for it or not. And if they're not, we have to then look at and explain why not and how to fix it. That's kind of what I'm doing from a human factors perspective. There's a good mix of research and kind of design and development. Then there's a good amount of hands-on and kind of validation of human factors principles in there too. So it's a good mix of, I would call it theoretical and practical human factors involved with my particular position.
Thanks. We have another question from Dr. Parikh. Dr. Parikh, would you please turn on your mic and you can ask? I think that will be better. Then it will be easy to convey your message.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Dustin. This is really helpful. So I looked at the participant list, and I believe there are some who are in the master's program considering joining our PhD program or PhD program elsewhere. So my question is, can you highlight, now that you are kind of all done with your PhD, the three most satisfying moments or things about getting a PhD versus, had you had an opportunity to get a full-time position back with your master's, what would have that been? So how do you compare getting a PhD versus master's with a job? You can talk in terms of growth potential, dollars, respect, whatever comes to your mind. Please share.
Yeah. So I would imagine, so the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society, if you're a member of it, and you're able to gain access to the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society, I don't know how often they do this survey, but they have like a I guess a pay scale type of survey that they do, and they kind of go across the entire continental United States, and they look at various regions and say, all right, if you have a master's with X number of years, here's the median and mean level of pay. If you have a PhD with X number of years of experience, this is the kind of pay. And what I noticed while looking at that survey was that the PhDs, even with 0 to 3 years of experience, tended to have a higher median and mean salary range than those that with just a master's at the same experience level, if not one above it. So for me, kind of that pay scale increase is definitely something satisfying to consider. And then also another thing that kind of for a PhD is it's just extremely satisfying to go through the entire process, and as crazy as it sounds, well, as probably as it's expected, that feeling of being done with the PhD is an incredible feeling as well, because all the time and effort that you kind of put through, you put in to get it done, you got something done, and out of that you can generally get a handful of publications out of that as well. And so the more the publications that you have, and the more that they're cited, the more you can kind of see your quote unquote sphere of influence grow in terms of what you're able to contribute to your science. And with a PhD, at least in human factors, the goal is to really contribute to the advancement of the science and, have something for others after you to kind of build on. I think that kind of really, for me at least, is an incredible feeling, knowing that I was able to build on one of these human factors methods and even introduce and combine two different sciences to offer up a new way to do human factors research using a new method. And to know that other students in the future may end up, using my papers or my thoughts to help guide their data analysis and use that type of methodology is pretty crazy to think about. I mean, even if they don't use it, that's fine. But if it ends up getting used, awesome. I'm happy I'm able to contribute to somebody's advancement of their knowledge. And that's, those are kind of some of the main points, I think, of what really makes getting a PhD or working towards a PhD extremely exciting and rewarding.
That's a very very nice answer. Yes. Mm-hmm. I think I see a raised hand from Dr. Paleshi. Dr. Paleshi, would you please ask your question?
Oh, sure. First of all, Dustin, thank you very much for your wonderful presentation here. We all enjoyed that, and it's great for us. Two questions, quick questions. First, what kind of collaborations do we have, in this field? Meaning that what other departments or field in general a scientist in the area of human factor or economics, would collaborate with? That's first question. And the second one is about machine learning, and its importance, especially in recent years, it's growing, it's getting more and more important. What is the connection between, or the role of machine learning, in your field? Have you do you have any knowledge about that, or have you worked in this area at all?
Okay, yeah. So I'll take that first question first, because that one's more of a softball toss-up, and that one I can answer more directly. That first question, at least in human factors at the Boeing Company, we work, or at least in my particular role, in my particular programs and platforms, we're working with a ton of other fields. We work with, computer design, coders, computer scientists. We're working with actual pilots. We're working with maintainers and people on the maintenance crews. We're working with people on the assembly lines and the manufacturing side. So really, we're working with pretty much everybody associated with Boeing in the Boeing Company at some point throughout the entire process. So I would say, at least in the field of human factors, in my type of work, we're having to, we interact with everybody, and you have to have that ability to interact and collaborate across lines. That second item about machine learning is definitely a growing concept within human factors, especially when you're looking at human and computer interaction, especially because if you're looking at machine learning and even natural language processing, NLPs, a lot of that is, it's obviously computer driven, but it's also potentially driven by human inputs. So if you kind of think about something like Alexa or Google Home or Siri or whatever product you're using, like for a smart home or whatever, a lot of times as a human, you want to ask it a question, and sometimes you might get the response of, oh, I can't answer that, or I don't know how to answer that. And so as a human, you're kind of learning how you need to interact with the machine to get a desired outcome. And so something similar to that, and the machine learning how the human is expecting to interact with it and adjusting its output is definitely something that is a small field in human factors, but is definitely growing. And I could only imagine it increasing over time, especially as, technology starts to continue to advance.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Dustin, we have 5 more minutes. I would like to ask one question related to your last few months. I know that in the last few months you were working a full-time job and also working towards finalizing your dissertation. So I know that some of our students, or some of my past students, had to face this problem, this phase. So can you just talk about your experience towards this opportunity or possibility, or how did you live that, and whether it's something that is avoidable, or just your experience?
I'm sorry, I was losing a little bit of service there at the first half of your question.
So my question is, can you talk about your experience in working a full-time job and finalizing your dissertation?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So this is the thing I'll start with is that kind of decision is not for everybody. I would definitely would highly recommend students really think something through before they make that kind of commitment and jump. How it worked out for me was for my dissertation, by the time I was offered a position at Boeing, my dissertation, all my data had been collected and all my data had been analyzed. So all I was doing was in the process of writing the dissertation document itself and going through that dissertation document prep and the eventual defense. So most of the legwork, so to speak, was pretty much done for my dissertation, and therefore my advisor and I felt comfortable with me being able to take on a full-time job with, just the document preparation needing to be done. So I would definitely, if students end up going down a similar road that I ended up taking, to really consider where they are in their PhD process and what's left to be done and how much time you can devote to it. Because these past couple of months, I haven't really had a lot of free time despite there being a pandemic and mostly staying at home. There was a lot of writing that had to be done over the weekends, a lot of late nights during the week to meet deadlines that, you kind of are expecting are going to happen, but probably not to the frequency that, I had to do it. So it was definitely it's definitely a rewarding challenge, especially to, take an industry position and get paid to get paid a friendly wage, so to speak, but also still working towards finishing, a really big accomplishment. So it's definitely rewarding, but definitely not for everybody, and should be strong. I urge a lot of caution in making that type of decision and making sure that you and your advisor are both comfortable with where you're at in the dissertation process before making such a move.
Thanks a lot, Dustin. Thanks very much. I know that some of the students, some of my past students have kind of had to decide towards that, and some of the future students will maybe have to decide towards that. So your experience is important. Parag, I think we are 1 minute away from our time, so maybe we can go out on the concluding remarks. I will take the first. I would take the opportunity now to thank Dustin for opening this seminar series. I think it was a great interview, and your insights were very helpful. I hope that our students also kind of enjoyed that, and feel free to ask additional questions, so we can also ask this offline to Dustin. And also would like to take the opportunity to thank Parag and Jacob for making this happen. Without your work, this would have been very much difficult. So now I'll leave the floor to Arsalan and maybe Dr. Parikh also to thank or final remarks. Dr. Palesh.
Dr. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I think it was wonderful. It was a wonderful, basically presentation. And like I said, we all benefited from this. Really appreciate it again, Dustin. Thank you. And wish you the very best, at your profession, your career down the road for years to come.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. It was a privilege to talk to these students, and hopefully kind of make that decision-making process when the time comes a little bit easier and a little bit more bearable.
Hey, Dustin, it's Dr. Parikh here. Hey, again, totally second or rather third what Dr. Gentili and Dr. Paleshi said. I think, while you helped us kick off this seminar series, one of the key things was, this was not a standard kind of slides. This was very straight from the heart, straight from experience, very insightful. And I think that's what graduate students need, and not just PhD, but anybody who's in the master's program or upper level bachelor's thinking about going into the master's program. These are the kind of insights they are looking for. So fantastic. Thank you for making arrangements to still do this call, over the phone, and we truly appreciate. Parag, thanks a lot for setting it up, and same Jacob for finding Dustin for us. Really appreciate it. Dustin, best wishes to you, and stay connected to UofL. You do have some roots here as well, so we hope you stay in touch with us and be a future speaker on some research agenda topics as Dr. Paleshi and Dr. Gentili decide. Again, good luck.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again. So good luck.
All right.
Thanks so much. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for setting this up. It was really good. Very helpful.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.